Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 17th edition of the Frank and Stan Spotlight edition of our weekly chat. So, these spotlights are a chance where we can invite a guest and we talk about one particular topic. So, we don't have what's caught your eye this week, it's all about a particular topic. And that topic today is going to be about human resources, people management, this sort of stuff. And I'm delighted to
Personnel when
say,
I was
what
little.
was it called, Stan?
Personnel.
Personnel.
That's what it was.
And I'm delighted we've got Juliet Caunt, who I've worked with for a number of years, who's joining us today. So, hello, Juliet, and welcome. Let's meet again.
Hello, Frank. Hi, Stan.
Yeah,
I perhaps I should say, Frank, that we've previous to recording this, we've decided that none of the things we're going to talk about are going to be live issues. So although we're going to talk about HR issues generally and maybe some past specific things that we've all come across, none of it is going to be stuff that any of the three of us is working on currently.
yeah,
And
that's
it's just
great.
to make that clear.
Thanks for that, Stan. I mean, I the first time I met Juliet was in a reception area of of the Crown Plaza Hotel in Leeds because the DFE had decided to give trusts of a certain size a grant to employ a HR professional, shall we say, and that grant allowed us to set up an HR department, shall we? And so Juliet and I met with regard to that, and that must have been in about 2013,
Yeah.
2014, something like that. And I have to say, even in my time, from being a CEO between 2013 and 2019, the role of HR within these March Academy trusts changed dramatically. So in a way, I'm very keen to sort of take it back a little bit further than that, Juliet. And this gives you the opportunity to just give us a little bit of background as to what you did before we met and what made you get into this area in the first place.
Right. Okay. So if I wind right back, I studied psychology at university in Reading. I didn't really know what I wanted to do afterwards. Like many people leaving university, I think. I went and worked in a hotel because I'd had a pub job and I thought hospitality seemed like a good career move. And whilst I was there, I started to work a little bit alongside their HR manager. I looked after the employee recognition scheme. I did a little bit of recruitment. And I think I realised that hotel life was not for me. And I saw a job advertised with Royal Mail, which was for a 3-month temporary contract as a recruitment administrator. And I thought, well, I can always go back to the hotel. So my first 3 years or so, I was based at the post office's management, recruitment and training centre near Rugby. And I mainly worked with recruitment, but I worked with the occupational psychologists and had the opportunity to really develop a depth of expertise around recruitment, but it was very much from an administrative point of view, running assessment
Right.
centres.
So that would have involved a move then, wouldn't it? Reading to Rugby.
Yeah, well, no, I lived near Rugby.
Ah, right.
So
So
I
you
grew
just
I
went to
grew up in a
Reading.
little village on the Northamptonshire Warwickshire border.
Ah, right.
Rugby was the town I was born in. My mum taught there. She was a biology teacher
Ah, right,
and
right.
then had moved into a middle school. So I spent my formative years in a lot of staff rooms. Uh, um, but then I was in a relationship with somebody who lived in Leeds. One of us had to move,
Right.
and through the connections that I developed at the Cohen House, the management centre, I got a transfer with Royal Mail up to their head office for the northeast region. So it looked after the whole region from kind of Sheffield right up to the Scottish borders. And initially, my role was helping their policy manager with an equal opportunities project, which was to design some training for the whole of all the management in the northeast, um, revisiting previous training work. But Royal Mail was a massive, I
Mm,
mean, I think second biggest employer in the country at the time. Um, a real mixture of kind of management, but also a lot of operational staff out delivering, sorting the mail. And the HR roles were very boxed, if you like. They were very specific. So you did policy, or you did training, or you did recruitment. So my career there at Royal Mail, from that 3-month temporary contract, ended up being about 12 years.
Right.
And I moved through lots of different specialisms. From recruitment, I headed up recruitment, I headed up training. I led on when they started to do a lot of change at Royal Mail, and they went from 2 daily deliveries to 1 daily delivery. I was involved in the planning for that and the consultations with staff. So I can remember driving to, I think, Bridlington or somewhere for meeting staff before they went out on their morning deliveries. And sitting in this tiny little office at York railway station to meet with the night shift at 2 o'clock in the morning. And there's some, because this tended to be a job that people towards the end of their career, when they stopped doing the walks, they tended to be there. They'd sit around, wait for a train to come in, move mail around.
Oh, I see.
And so I'd gone to meet with them. So I had some really really interesting experiences as an HR professional. Getting out and meeting people, but it was a 24-hour operation.
Yeah. So in a way, all of that breadth of experience was very helpful when we met in Leeds, because actually I'm pretty certain, I can't remember who there was that was managing HR in our very small trust at the time. But actually it probably was people in academies who were doing a little bit of work. So this breadth of experience that you got there was probably quite helpful in terms of understanding what we needed to do to create something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I'd had experience of every single thing you threw my way. I think the first one was Tupi. It's like, okay, I better go learn about that. Which I've done in spades now. But I think, the experience that I had at Royal Mail, I mean, I'd done budgets, I'd led on data, scorecards and things like that. So all of those little bits of experience have gone into the tool bag over the years.
So in a way, I mean, Stan, have you seen, in your time, on the HR front, what's your take on how things have changed since Juliet's first days working for the Royal Mail?
From my point of view, I think what's changed isn't necessarily HR, but what's changed in the role I have is head teachers thinking that the rules don't really apply to them, and we can do that. It won't matter that and I've seen it over and over again where I don't know, no idea of the HR processes that they really need to go through until they do
goes
something
wrong.
Yeah, and I know I have a really good colleague, Dave, who's an independent HR.
Has been a guest on here before as well, hasn't he?
He has, Dave, yeah. And Dave used to run 2 courses in Lancashire. One was, well, what do you do to stop the wheels falling off? And that was about all the things you should prepare in your HR processes, etc. And then the second one was, what do you do when the wheels have fallen off? For those people who hadn't followed course 1. It's just, I think because I've done a lot of work in local authorities and know that the processes are there and need to, I think partly one of the things of academisation has done has kind of, for a time, lost that connection with I need to check with somebody first. And I think I'm guessing now that's coming back to I'm doing something that's fairly risky here. We need some HR.
Yeah, I think, and not talking about people in the trust that we work for, but the work I've done subsequently, I've found when I've been trying to resolve perhaps a performance management issue, that actually when I speak to, say, a CEO or a head teacher, they've sensed that they're getting into territory that they don't feel comfortable in, but actually saw it as a weakness to seek help at that point. There was this sense of wanting to be decisive and I'm clear about the way forward, and I think that if you sense that feeling in you that you're into territory here which you've never been down before or you feel unfamiliar with, most of them realized they were unfamiliar with the territory but didn't go and seek the help. And I think our conversations, Juliet, not about anything specific, but many occasions when I just came to you to say, "Oh, what do you think?" And actually your view would be entirely different to mine. I have to say most times I did side with your view. I mean, just thought I don't really know. You have these people as experts. It's best time to sort of start listening to the experts, sort of thing. So I think for me, that's where I think you're right, Stan. Some people have found themselves in tricky positions.
Well, I think I was as guilty as anybody when I first became a head, because you almost feel as though you're omnipotent. There's nothing can stop you. And I can remember ringing, as it happens, it was Dave then who was my HR person within the county, and saying, "I've got somebody coming back from maternity leave who wants to do part-time. I'm not having it." And he
Yeah.
just said, "You lose." Oh no, Dave, I've got this reason, I've got that reason, I've got that reason.
Yeah.
So you can't do it, Stan, is basically what I was told.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful, because although it wound me up and I, thought that's madness, I should be able to control all this, it was great to have somebody who wasn't trying to placate me or trying to give me ways of doing it. It was just saying that's not the right thing to do. So stop now. Don't
Yeah.
get yourself into the water.
Yeah. I mean, does that relate to you, Juliet? Can you sort of see that?
Yeah, I can see both sides, in that occasionally there are things where you really do feel that you have to highlight the risks of going down a particular route to a head teacher and or CEO, and
I'll
just
see
say,
it. Yeah.
maybe we need to think of another way. But I think that there is transactional and process stuff that HR need to help with and to keep things on track. But increasingly outside of education, what you're seeing is CEOs and trust boards recognizing that the value of having their senior HR person as an integral
Yes.
person involved in those strategic discussions before you get to the point of going, "Oh my goodness, this has happened, what are we going to do about it?" And that then enables conversations to happen about how best to get from A to B, and you might have to go via C or D to get there.
Yes.
But how best to get there without and taking everybody with you, and everybody being together and moving forwards, rather than getting to a problem solving situation. And I think sometimes in education, HR isn't quite at that point. But equally, I've in my more recent role, I've seen and touched base with all sorts of different people in different trusts over the last 12 months, and I see that isn't always the case everywhere. So I think and it's one of the things I said to new head teachers when I've been involved in induction or delivering training is you've got your HR business partner, your HR manager. They are there to help and support you. You want to be working together as business partners.
Yes.
Not just using them as an emergency service.
Yeah. It's funny. It's making me remind me of the first time I think we had to transfer over a payroll into the trust, and to be honest, I had absolutely no idea how you were going to do that. But it was just at those points where you know that you've never dealt with it before. This is new, and actually having somebody who knew what they were doing is so valuable. And you don't realize what you don't know until often it goes wrong. So I think and I'm not saying that there have been times when I found myself in tricky situations as a head teacher, thinking, how do I move this forward? And in the local authority, which is what I was part of, the HR department was not one that you knew a face to. It was somebody I very, very, very rarely spoke to. So that sense of a relationship and trusting that person when we did the payroll, for example, having you there managing that gave me reassurance that it was going to go well. When you're in the local authority and it's a far distant sort of being, and it
Yeah.
might not be the same person, it does feel more difficult to trust it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's one of the advantages of multi-academy trust, isn't it? That they have got their people in-house, however they, whoever it is and however they
yeah,
choose to structure it, those people are in-house, they're on the payroll, and they're invested in that individual trust as opposed to the local authority or an external provider, which is a more, service level agreement, transactional kind of approach.
now, Stan, you've got a number of schools, aren't you, that you support? Some of the
Yeah.
some of the work that your advisors do must be in this territory, mustn't it?
Well, I would say more and more staffing issues are raised with the advisor, and it's not our area of total strength because that's
Yes,
not
yes.
not where we are. So thankfully, we do have Dave who works with us, and we tend to shift things over to him for his advice. So
Mm,
it's a matter of him either advising the advisor on the route to take or directly advising the head teacher. But for me, staffing issues seem to be on the
Mm.
rise. I don't know if that's
mm,
generally or just in a few schools where my team are involved.
yeah. I mean, I'm interested in also, Stan, in how the role of HR, has changed. Certainly in my 6 years at the co-op, it changed dramatically, more into a sort of people director role, which I think is what you eventually got to, Juliet.
Yeah.
I mean, can you just sort of take us on that journey as to how these things morph into something very different? Because that day in Leeds, when I met you in that hotel reception area, it was pretty basic stuff, but actually it ended up doing a lot of stuff around areas that I
Yeah.
had no idea we were going to get into.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's almost two things there. One is the kind of journey that I went on with co-op, which I can talk a little bit about, and the other is how HR as a profession has changed
Yeah,
and
I think,
will have to continue to change. And I
yeah,
think the two have probably been happening in
all
parallel
right,
a
good.
little bit. But with co-op, when I joined and we first met, there were, I believe, 6 schools. They were in 3 separate legal entities. All of the HR professional service were outsourced to 3 different
Yeah,
local authority
yes.
or private providers. And there were in-school people, either, I think one of the schools had a professional HR manager, but a lot of it was school business managers. So, from that starting point to the point that I left, when there were almost 40 schools, the journey was from initially very much a focus on joining those 3 trusts together, amalgamating the payroll, developing policies and procedures, because there were 3 different sets of policies and procedures, and a lot of work in that area to
Mm.
standardize the framework, I suppose, for HR.
Yeah, because there was the key thing. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought. I thought having academies in 3 different trusts was not a major issue when I first took on this role. But then I realised that as a single employer, you can't have different processes going on in different local authorities. And we talk about HR, but that also is around safeguarding.
Yeah.
What is the arrangements for? They're different. We have this sense, I think, people outside of education. Well, surely Bury are dealing with. They've got the same threshold levels as those in, say, Stoke or Stockport. No, there are differences, and sometimes pressure on services affects where those thresholds sit, and that's actually a big risk for a CEO. So yeah, so it's not just HR. Stanley, I could see you
I was
can
going to
say
say that
something.
the culture in HRs in local authorities is very different.
Yes.
I came across an HR team who were almost so tied up with GTP and not breaking the rules that they wouldn't talk to us about issues that were going on in schools. even though, we were the education department, and we'd have I mean, again, how things have changed. There was a time when we would meet on a monthly basis with the schools, governors, head of governance, head of finance, head of data, sit down and go through the schools that were having difficulty and share where the problem. Because often doing
Yeah.
that, you can preempt what's going to happen when somebody's saying, "Well, there was a bit of tension at a governors meeting," and you start to think, "Oh, what, why is that?" etc.
Yes.
We got to a point where HR wouldn't discuss any of the things that were going on because they thought they were breaking um, protocols, and I got really frustrated and said, "This is just a nonsense." So the guy actually agreed he would share it with me, and I could share it with the group, but I was the one who was taking the risk of. And it sounds as though it's ridiculous, but and then they were going to they reported what I was suggesting to the data manager or
Yeah.
the professional in this authority, who we had the shortest conversation going because she said, "So what's the issue? Why do you think you should have this information? Because of safeguarding of children." Okay, you win.
Yes.
That trumps anything anything else. So it was just frustration because I think I'd worked in an authority where the culture was we deal with it and we
Mm.
fix the problem one way or another and we get involved, to one where, oh, and some of the examples which I can't give obviously because they're real people, they're just eye-watering,
Right.
of what's gone on, and the cost to the authorities of not dealing with issues when they could have dealt with them.
I think one of the things I mean, I'd like to just talk a little bit about this, Juliet, about how once those protocols and structures and policies are in place, how it then became necessary to improve the quality of HR provision in academies, so that the head teacher knew it wasn't Juliet Caunt now that I'm going to speak to, it's another who I know very well. I mean, can you just take us on how that morphed into a sort of team?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was we had to do a bit of a cost benefit, really, didn't we? Because there was a tipping point at which it became much more sensible to have it in house. But initially, the cost would have been, not sensible. But I think there were also concerns around the quality of advice
Mm.
in terms of somehow cases were handled. So as as the trust grew, the number of schools increased, and that then paved the way for us to bring people in house. And we were very lucky with the first couple of appointments into my team, in
Mm.
that they sort of came with the schools, although they weren't employed by
Yes.
the schools. They were the
Yeah.
external providers, people who chose when they saw the jobs advertised to join us. So the phase, I suppose, that we went through then was about making sure that my team were working closely with the heads, picking up on what Stan was saying earlier about head teachers having quite strong views on things, which is important because
Yes.
they are the leaders of their schools. But some were probably more open than others to working closely with it and proactively with HR, and others took longer to
To be
develop those
persuaded.
relationships with. Um, but as schools joined, the team grew, and there were always some core aspects of the role, which was around things like supporting with recruitment, making sure that
Mm.
single central records were always up to date, supporting schools with absence management, which I think has become an increasingly challenging area. And that it's a careful balance, I think, between policemen and audit and making sure the rules are being followed, and trusting people to get on with doing the job. And sometimes it's hard to find that balance. You put your trust in head teachers that you've explained what the rules are, and that we will be doing, I know, annual performance reviews for everybody in the school, and you trust that they get on with it. And you hope that that trust isn't misplaced, because I would always want to work with trust as a starting point,
Yes, yes.
But so there's a bit of the policeman, but there's also that proactive role in meeting regularly with the heads about, well, what are your future plans? What's your workforce plans for the next 3 years? And there's a little bit about that problem solving, the casework, which was always there. I'm not sure, picking up on what Stan had said, whether that has gone up generally. I think it can sometimes be a reflection of the culture within the school. So if the school's on an improvement journey and having to take difficult decisions and have difficult conversations with people and maybe tighten up on some ways of doing things, then that can sometimes trigger more of those sorts of issues.
That's why I think sometimes HR is really important, because for all, we want school leaders to be objective and everything must be about the children. There are friendships and there are loyalties and there are long-term relationships that make it difficult when somebody's behaviour in terms of, say, attendance changes, that it's not easy for a head teacher to suddenly apply everything that should be applied, because there's a relationship where I don't mean an inappropriate relationship. I mean proper.
No.
And so sometimes to be able to say, I need HR advice, and I need to say to this person, I'm now following HR advice. So I somehow separate myself from the friendship
but actually having somebody who's there, who in that situation, I'm just thinking about the HR colleague. If the HR colleague is known to both parties, then I think that does help, in effect that, you feel as though that you have a chance, the HR colleague has a chance to develop the trust and that they're respected. And going back to my days in the local authority, I never had that. It was always a colleague. I didn't know who the hell they were. You know what I mean? So I do think that the development of teams, HR expertise, being much closer to the delivery of a service is really helpful. But you did mention, I'm going to say something now, Juliet, that you will remember, because I want to get on to some work that you've been doing. You and I and a couple of other colleagues went over to Northern Ireland. We flew over to Northern Ireland because we had been informed that there were a number of Northern Ireland teachers who could not find jobs. So I remember being interviewed on Radio 5 in the airport, at Manchester Airport, in the car park, explaining why we were doing this. You carried banners, I carried booklets. We flew over for the day and ended up at some Ulster University or Belfast University, only to find it was the wrong conference.
Yes.
So
my one of my long held ambitions was to go on an aeroplane for work.
We picked up absolutely no teachers whatsoever. But one thing that we did too, and it does get in now into you talking about some work that you've been doing recently, was we did think about how could we attract, if there were available Northern Ireland teachers who wanted to come and work in the Northwest, what was it we would need to offer them to attract them? And we spoke about, didn't we, about assisting them with housing costs, giving them return flights at half term or Christmas or whatever, in order that they could still connect with their family, So I think that's something that we did get a lot out of, because started to think about, well, what's the package? What are we offering our staff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, apart from the fact it was the wrong event,
Yes.
learning opportunity for everybody, I think that it was a sound idea. And as you say, we put a lot of thought into how we would, market and try to attract those people. And I think that is still a very relevant point for trusts at the moment. And as I mentioned to you, just while we were chatting beforehand, one of the benefits of me working independently is that I have got that flexibility, as well as working with a lot of different clients, to spend time researching things that pique my interest,
Yes.
that perhaps I haven't had the chance to do previously. And I've recently been working on a bit of research around employee benefits that are offered. And I've got a great recent graduate called Charlotte who's been helping me. She's desperate to work in HR, and I'm, you know, trying to give her a little bit of work experience.
If anybody's looking for
yeah, psychology graduate,
right.
really keen to work in HR, lives up in Middlesbrough, willing to relocate to London. But
wow.
She's helping me with this. But what we're doing is we've researched 50 different multi-academy trusts, from the very smallest to the very biggest, in terms of what they're saying on their websites or job adverts in relation to the employee benefits that they offer. And pulling all of that together, Charlotte's been doing some data analysis on any differences between the North and the South, between small, medium and large trusts. What are the most commonly advertised benefits? Are there any unique things that maybe the smaller trusts are coming up with that a large trust has? You know, it's got to go through 10 different committees and get 40 different head teachers on board with, which can make things challenging. So we're still in the process of wrapping that up and writing it up, but it's proving really interesting. You know, for example, I think there were only about 75% of the trusts that even mentioned the pension schemes, right. Which less so for the local government scheme, which actually, if you're trying to attract somebody from Starbucks or wherever, yes, into the education sector, really explaining some of those benefits is quite important. And there were one or two trusts where we just couldn't find any information, or very, very little. Yes. You know, it might have mentioned the pension, and then you got some really funny statements like exceptional annual leave, and it's like, well, what is it? Is it exceptional compared to the statutory minimum, or is it genuinely more than I would have had when I was working at co-op type of thing? Yes. So I think once we've pulled all that together, I'm not quite sure how we best make it available.
Well, we'd be very happy to have Juliet and her colleague back on here to share the findings of that. That would be brilliant. We don't have a massive reach, so it's not as if it would stop you advertising, putting it in a trade press or something. But
I mean, it's something that I was curious about, which is why I started looking at it. But it I think has become, you know, quite a useful piece of work, and hopefully, you know, because I suppose where I'm at now in my career, having, I mean, a Royal Mail, I worked, we haven't talked about, worked at the Legal Aid Agency.
Oh, of course, yeah. Sorry, I missed that bit out.
Big chunk of time at co-op, and now I'm in a position where I like to reach out and have a benefit on the system as a whole in some way, even if it's a small way, and have recently become a trustee at a MAT as well. So, you know, this is one bit of work, and I'm hoping there may be other bits like that I can work on over the next you know, few years as well.
I know it's done. There's a CEO called Johnny Utley who works in in East Yorkshire.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody talks about West Yorkshire. I don't hear East Yorkshire being spoken about very often. But yeah, but he spoke at the Forum Strategy conference, which is a CEO organisation, last year, and he was stressing how much attention he'd given to, you know, the benefits, and how he'd actually and actually that only came about through primarily talking to his staff, you know, and actually asking staff, well, if you were to persuade your friend to come and join this trust, what would you be saying to them to better understand the personal story? Because actually your staff, the staff that you currently have, are a really big opportunity for them to sell, you know, the trust or your job.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, there is not a lot of point somebody sitting in an HR office going, right, okay, let's offer these benefits. There you go, benefits ticked off on the list, job done. Actually, if they are not benefits that are useful and meaningful to staff, then they won't access them. So sitting down with staff and saying, you know, which of these are most useful to you, saves trust spending money on things that are perhaps not valued, and makes the offer to the staff much more attractive, and then helps with recruitment and retention. So absolutely agree with that, Frank.
Right. Well, we'd love to have you back.
Definitely.
Anytime.
Definitely, it'd be really interesting.
With that information, that to undo that, I think will be really helpful. I was just thinking, I was just trying to find it, but I couldn't. We had one chat where we talked about recruitment and benefits, and I referred to I can't remember his name now. Even the advert to go to the South Pole with the expedition.
Yes, Shackleton. Was it Shackleton?
Shackleton. It says sort of wanted men, poor accommodation, chance of survival pretty low, something, and they're just really horrible things. And he had hundreds of people, hundreds of men apply for this. And when we talked to a school then that said we're actually going to do something honest, and we're going to put a list of this is what it's like to work here.
Yes.
They recruited on that on a
Yeah.
none of this. We have lovely children here who are looking forward to a hero who's going to run our school. It was far more honest about how tough the job was.
Because what does my head in is when, and it's not a school or trust that we've been involved in, but you see them in the TES or whatever, and they advertise a role and say it's a science role, but actually there's nothing in the letter of invite from the head teacher or the CEO to say this is why we want you. There's no photos of the science department. There's no photos of children doing any science work whatsoever. It's a standard sort of picture. And you think, well, if we're so desperate to get the best head of science, say, why have we not spent time really drilling down into what it is we really do need?
Yeah, we could do a whole session on that. As you know, I've spent quite a bit of time looking at recruitment, but just picking up on what Stan was saying, I'd seen something fairly recently where a pub had used all of its bad TripAdvisor comments for billboard advertising, and it got onto the BBC News or whatever as a result. So actually, by doing something a little bit different and honest, had helped them. That's marketing, isn't it? Which is a little bit of HR as well.
Yeah, because Well, the problem with this is that we could talk for another hour, and actually we've had nearly 40 minutes. So I know it's unbelievable. But Juliet, please come back when you've finished that report. We'd love to discuss that with you and your colleague as well, because if she hasn't got a job by then, this may be an opportunity for her to get one.
Absolutely, I'm sure she'd be delighted to join us.
Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you so much for joining us today. And
thank you.
Yeah, and
thank you both.
And we've got further spotlights lined up over the next couple of weeks, which look at a variety of single issues. But thank you for taking us down the HR road today. All right.
Pleasure.
So until the next time, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.